Today is February 12, 2024. The presidential nomination finally came to Nevada, home of Film and TV Network. Both processes, called primary election and caucuses, took place mid of last week. It is one of the earliest primaries after Iowa and New Hampshire. I'm Esmeralda Padilla Gold, filling in for Sam Buban, who is still on special assignment in Asia. Welcome to The Pulse.
And I'm Sarah Obal. Welcome to this week's edition of The Pulse.
The Democratic Party in Nevada held their presidential preference primary on February 6th, and President Joe Biden came out as the winner after taking 89.3% of votes cast, while the lone challenger in the ballot, Marianne Williamson, got 2.9%. But about 5.8% voted none of these candidates. With the Nevada win, Joe Biden earned 36 delegates who will vote in his favor in the Democratic National Convention in the fall of this year. On the Republican side, it gets more confusing even for many voters, as both a primary and caucus take place. That means they have a presidential preference primary election which is non-binding in as far as winning the delegates for the Republican National Convention, where they will vote for the nominee for president, who will represent the Republican Party for president in the general election in November. But they also have the caucuses in Nevada, which is done similar to the one in Iowa. The Nevada Republican Party rules forbids candidates from being in the ballot for both primary election and the caucus. Nikki Haley, who has put up a stronger than expected challenge to Donald Trump, is listed on the primary ballot, while Donald Trump is listed in the caucus ballot. The Republican presidential primary ballot listed Nikki Haley, former Vice President Mike Pence, and Senator Tim Scott. But even Nikki Haley was defeated by none of the above candidates' votes, who got 63.2% of all votes counted, while Nikki Haley only got 30.5%. But this Republican primary for nominating seems like an exercise in futility when it comes to gaining the 26 delegates from Nevada, because the state Republican Party ruled that only the winner in Nevada caucus can actually take the 26 delegates. 2 days later, the Nevada Republican caucuses took place and Donald Trump came out as the winner and takes with him the 26 delegates who will take part on the nomination process for the Republican presidential candidate in the general election. We want to do a little explainer here for the benefit of our film audience in the US and other parts of the world. First, we would like you to understand that United States political practice is that it has a two-party system, the Republicans and the Democrats. In Congress, the House of Representatives is controlled by the Republicans, while the US Senate is controlled by Democrats. The president who sits in the White House is also a Democrat. When it comes to federal elected office, there is what is known as a primary election, which functions as the elimination round of several candidates who want to run as candidate in the general election, which is the real election. In the case of this year's election, it will take place on November 5th. Depending on what state the primary takes place, the Republicans created state-by-state rules on the conduct of selecting their nominee for president. And that is through a primary just like the Democrats, and the election they call as a Republican caucus. That just creates confusions, designed to give advantage to their favorite candidates. Either way, both parties have to choose a nominee for president who will run in the general election. An incumbent president like Joseph Biden, who can still run for one more term as the Constitution limits, is usually the presumed nominee. If this process seems confusing to you, don't worry, you are not alone.
Attempts to amend the abortion ban in the state of Missouri, considered one of the harshest and heartless bans in the nation, failed to get enough votes in the Missouri State Senate. Some Democratic state lawmakers in Missouri put forward a bill that will make exceptions to the ban on abortion for women who got pregnant as a result of rape or incest. According to a report from the Associated Press, Republican senators in Missouri, mostly men, voted against amending the state's strict abortion law to allow exceptions in case of rape or incest. The state bans almost all kinds of abortions after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. However, abortions are still legal in the state of Missouri in case of a medical emergency. Democratic State Senator Tracy McGreery said Missouri's current law goes too far and called on her colleagues to show an ounce of compassion for victims of rape and incest. "What we're saying here is, we don't care," said McCreary, "that we are going to force you to give birth even if that pregnancy was a result of forcible rape by a family member, a date, an ex-husband, or a stranger." Women around the country who want to retain their rights to choose have been voting against Republican candidates, even in many Republican majority states, as they see these Republican men and politicians as having declared war against women. According to many political analysts and strategists, the anti-abortion stand of the Republicans is their formula for defeat, as more and more of the Republicans were experiencing unexpected losses and defeats in every special election. A vast number of women are actively involved in making sure the Democrats control the 119th Congress and many state-level House of Representatives. The fear on the Republican side of women voters has become evident, as their candidates in many contests from state level to federal level had stopped mentioning abortion in their campaign. But the Democrats have been very active in confronting their opponents about their stand on abortion rights.
The oral argument before the U.S. Supreme Court in the Colorado and Maine ballot disqualification case of Donald Trump has begun last week. This is in relation to an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court after a Colorado state court did not rule to disqualify Trump from being on the Colorado ballot. And subsequently, the state of Maine took similar action to disqualify the former president from being in the ballot for president in the 2024 general election. Based on the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which bars any officer of the government from serving again if they committed sedition or rebellion against the United States Constitution. The case to disqualify Trump was filed against the former president by Republicans and independent voters in Colorado, seeking to bar him from running again for president. In last week's oral argument, the difficult task of the High Court to weigh in on the case became visible. For one, Chief Justice John Roberts expressed the possibility that a ruling against Trump would prompt efforts to disqualify others, and surely some of those will succeed. In a report from the Associated Press, both the conservative and liberal justices alike questioned whether Trump can be disqualified from being president again because of his efforts to undo his loss in the 2020 election to Joe Biden, ending in the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. The court's main concern is whether Congress must act before states can invoke on a constitutional provision that was adopted after the Civil War to prevent former office holders who engaged in insurrection from holding office once again. In the first ruling of this kind, the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that the provisions of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution could apply to Donald Trump. But the U.S. Supreme Court, that prefers to avoid cases in which it is the final arbiter of the political dispute, the justices appear to be searching for a consensus ruling, and the congressional action seems to draw the most support. Justice Alina Kagan, an Obama appointee, was among the several justices who wanted to know why a single state should decide who gets to be president of the United States. According to the same AP report, 8 of the 9 justices suggested that they are open to some of the arguments made by Jonathan Mitchell, Trump's lawyer at the Supreme Court. Trump could win his case if the court finds just one of those arguments persuasive. Justice Sonia Sotomayor sounded most skeptical of Mitchell's argument, although might not vote to uphold the Colorado ruling that found Trump has engaged in insurrection. But lawyer Jason Murray, who represents the voters of Colorado who sued to remove Trump from the ballot, pressed the point that Trump incited the Capitol attack to prevent the peaceful handover of power for the first time in history. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a Trump appointee, expressed that someone prosecuted for insurrection, if convicted, could be or shall be disqualified. Trump's attorney agreed with a caveat so as not to concede that the former president is not immune from prosecution. It is likely that the court could decide on this case in the month of March. Trump is also due to appear in the High Court through his lawyers in another case, to appeal a lower court ruling that Trump is not immune from prosecution. We are going to take a commercial break. Please stay with us.
Welcome back to The Pulse. In the Philippines, the alliance between President Bongbong Marcos and former President Rodrigo Duterte has disintegrated according to a report from the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Other world media, like Reuters, describe the crumble of the alliance as open warfare. Speaking in a rally in Mindanao, the former president called President Marcos a drug addict. But President Marcos did not personally respond to the mudslinging by the former president.
We begin with a growing rift within the Uniteam coalition. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. going on the offensive against his predecessor Rodrigo Duterte's verbal attacks. The comments of the erstwhile firebrand leader included an allegation President Marcos is a drug addict.
Si Bongbong Marcos bangag noon, ngayong presidente na bangag natin ang presidente. May drug addict tayo na presidente. Nung ako'y mayor, pinakitaan ako ng evidence ng PDEA. Doon sa listahan, nandoon yung pangalan mo. Ayaw kong sabihin yan kasi magkaibigan tayo. Kung hindi magkaibigan, magkakilala. Ikaw pumapasok kayo ng alanganin. Mr. President, baka susunod ka sa dinaanan ng tatay mo. Diyan ako takot. Ayaw ko mangyari sa iyo yan.
But Marcos, in an ambush interview, says Duterte's comments may have been prompted by his alleged use of an opioid painkiller. Duterte admitted in 2016 that he took fentanyl following a spinal injury from motorcycle accidents. As president, Duterte questioned the qualifications of one presidential contender whom he claimed is an illegal drug user. He did not directly name Marcos at that time.
PRRD has been taking the drug for a very long time now. When was the last time he told us that he was taking fentanyl? Mga 5-6 years ago, something like that. After 5-6 years, that has to affect yung kaya palagay ko kaya nagkakaganyan. So you know, I hope his doctors take better care of him than this.
Duterte also suggested that the big island of Mindanao, where Davao City is and Duterte's home is, should secede from the Philippines and be formed as a separate country. The Philippines' National Security Advisor, Eduardo Ano, said that the national government will not hesitate to use its authority and forces to quell and stop any and all attempt to dismember the republic. The breakup of the Marcos-Duterte alliance that helped propel Marcos Jr. to the presidency and Sara Duterte to the vice presidency was seemingly caused by the former president's opposition of Pro Marcos faction to amend the 1987 Constitution through a People's Initiative, instead of a constitutional convention. But some analysts are suggesting that it is just a smokescreen and there are other possible reasons. The Marcos and Duterte families joined forces in 2022, with Sara Duterte standing as Marcos's vice presidential running mate, allowing Marcos to tap the Duterte's family's huge support base and sealed a comeback for the Marcos dynasty. But cracks in the Marcos-Duterte relationship emerged early, according to reporting by Reuters. President Bongbong Marcos reversed Duterte's pro-China stance and pivoted back to the United States, granting Washington greater access to Philippine bases amid China's assertiveness in the South China Sea and near Taiwan. Marcos brought to the fore the arbitral ruling fortifying Manila's territorial claim in the South China Sea that Duterte's largely set aside in a move seen as directed at China, which has overlapping sovereignty claims in the South China Sea. Marcos also sought to revive the peace negotiations with the communist rebels, which his predecessor had scrapped, and Sara Duterte, the vice president, described an agreement with the devil. A major blow into the relationship came in November last year, when Marcos said he was considering rejoining the International Criminal Court. Duterte had withdrawn membership in 2018 after the court's prosecutor announced a preliminary examination into thousands of killings in Duterte's war on drugs. An investigation into Duterte's internationally rebuked war on drugs is underway at the Hague-based tribunal. The former president could be turned over the Hague, Netherlands-based court.
Continuing with our world news, Senegal is in danger after the elections were postponed, as demonstrators and police scuffle outside the National Assembly. Senegal's standing as a bulwark of democracy in a volatile area is in jeopardy. Congress has approved a controversial bill to postpone elections and prolong the term of President Macky Sall, who canceled the scheduled poll with just 3 weeks remaining. Leading opponent and not related to the president, Khalifa Sall, a former mayor of Dakar, referred to the postponement as a constitutional coup and asked citizens to demonstrate against it. The mood in the chamber was tense, and there were rumors that some opposition members of the assembly had been chased out by security personnel for attempting to obstruct the proceedings. 105 MPs ultimately supported the plan in a vote. Originally intended to be a 6-month delay, a last-minute modification expanded to 10 months, ending on December 15th. As soon as he made the historic delay public, demonstrators began to march through Dakar, the capital, demanding a change of heart. Senegal has long been regarded as one of West Africa's most stable democracies. It is the only nation on the continent of West Africa without a history of military takeovers. It has never postponed a presidential election and has seen 3 mostly peaceful transitions of power. But now that Senegal's democratic credentials are under jeopardy, a constitutional crisis is developing. Analysts state that the nation is about to confront a significant test of its judicial power. Now everyone will be watching the regional blocs to see how they handle this next democratic challenge.
In Turkey, at the earthquake anniversary vigil, frustration with the Turkish government explodes, according to a report by Reuters. At a vigil held early on Tuesday to mark the 1-year anniversary of the deadly earthquakes that struck southeastern Turkey, over 10,000 people turned out, with some voicing their disapproval of what they perceived to be government incompetence in the aftermath. The deadliest earthquake in contemporary Turkish history, measuring a magnitude of 7.8, destroyed entire towns and portions of cities in the southeast of the nation and neighboring Syria. It caused millions of people to become homeless and killed about 50,000 people in Turkey and about 5,900 in Syria. People in the hardest hit province in Turkey, Hatay in the southeast, heckled remarks during the vigil, demanding that local and government leaders quit and refrain from appearing at the monument. Some shouted, "Can anybody hear my voice?" when Health Minister Fahrettin Koca spoke in the provincial capital of Hatay. The phrase alluded to calls that victims made from under the debris as they waited for days for assistance to arrive. Locals claim that a large number of deaths were caused by waiting so long to be trapped in the chilly rubble, rather than by the buildings toppling. After the vigil, people tossed flowers into the Asi River, which runs through the city. Merve Gersel, who lost her aunt's husband, and her cousins in the earthquake, called out their names as she tossed a carnation into the water for each one. This is the echo of people's inner pain. It is an echo of how much people have suffered. There is no way to describe how to make up for the pain here. Those people's hearts are bleeding. Nesibe Duzgan said that she was tossing flowers in the water for everyone she knew and that the move unified the people of Hatay. President Tayyip Erdogan said in a statement on social media site X that the pain of the loss from the earthquakes was as fresh now as it was a year ago, and his government has moved into the immediate aftermath of what they call the disaster of the century. We're going into a commercial break. Please stick around.
Pure Medical Equipment provides top-notch quality medical supply equipment. Whether to rent or buy, Pure Medical Equipment and Supplies has it all.
Pure Medical Equipment is committed to serve and give back to Southern Nevada.
We deliver medical supplies and rentals to your door.
Welcome back to The Pulse. How are Ukrainian tech entrepreneurs surviving in this conflict with Russia? Here's a report we saw from Al Jazeera on February 24, 2022, just before 5 in the morning. Dmitry Saslov was taking his dog for a walk when he saw the first missile strikes overhead, signaling the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Fear filled his heart as he called friends and family to find out where they were. Ever since that day, the computer entrepreneur's daily existence has been characterized by continuous explosions, air raid sirens, the sounds of missiles flying over the city, the gunfire of heavy caliber weapons, the whistling of mines, and horrifying news. But even with the present intensification of the conflict, leaving his home and family behind has never been an option. I made it without hesitation. It was a values-based decision, he declared, considering his background in the tech sector and his MBA degree. Saslov thought about his career choices. Saslov remarked, "I don't think I aspired to become an entrepreneur, but given the circumstances, I immersed myself alongside new business partners." He was alluding to the events that preceded the founding of Uspasi, a corporate digital workspace developer, in the year that the war broke out with Spartak Polishuk, Volodymyr Pimavuk, and Kyrylo Milshuk. According to a research by the Lviv IT Cluster and the United States Agency for the International Development, the country's most major service export in 2023 was the technology sector, which includes companies like Uspasi and others like Grammarly and Makpo. This represents a bright spot in the otherwise difficult economic environment. Ukrainian Economy Minister Yulia Sviridenko stated that the nation's total export value decreased by 18.7% in 2022 compared to 2023, which is the lowest amount in 10 years.
Thousands of motorists were stranded on central Chinese roadways during the annual Lunar New Year rush due to heavy snowfall. Long traffic backups were visible on Hubei province on Monday night, according to aerial photos. Icy conditions caused some 4,000 cars to become stranded, a regional official said on state television CCTV. By Tuesday, the bottlenecks were supposed to be resolved. It was predicted that the unusually heavy snowfall in central China would persist until Wednesday. This Saturday is the Lunar New Year, and millions of people are returning home for their celebration. Traditionally, the previous evening's dinner is spent with family. Due to icy conditions, the airport in Wuhan, the capital of Hubei, had to close its runways for a while. Travelers were left stranded for hours as several planes and trains were canceled. Following a significant snowstorm, a roof fell at a produce fair in neighboring Hunan province on Monday, leaving 1 person dead and 13 injured, according to the official Xinhua news agency. Xinhua said that quilts with cotton padding and other relief supplies were being shipped to Hunan.
South Koreans maintained their composure despite the North's increasing threats. According to an Associated Press report, there hasn't been any disturbance in the serenity in the country's capital despite North Korea's recent increase in threats and increased weapon testing directed against South Korea. Ranina, a 33-year-old office worker, was among 12 South Koreans who spoke to the Associated Press, sounding more apathetic than alarmed. "We learned to be numb," Na said. "We grew up witnessing North Korea use nuclear provocations as a kind of showmanship to keep its regime stable," Na stated. "When they act out, it feels more like an annual event they stage when they need to shore up internal unity or want outside help, rather than a real threat." This is a sharp contrast to remarks made recently by Kim Jong-un, the leader of Pyongyang, who stated in January that his country was giving up on its main goal of a peaceful reunion with South Korea. Additionally, he restated his threat to destroy the South if provoked. Concurrently, North Korea has been testing a lot of weaponry, including what it claimed were mock nuclear assaults on the South. After the North launched hundreds of artillery shells into the waters close to its disputed Western Sea boundary with South Korea, which prompted the South to retaliate, fears of a direct provocation increased. In South Korea, there is currently worry, but not panic. Furthermore, it's nothing like the chaotic scenes that occurred in 1994, when a North Korean negotiator threatened to turn Seoul into a sea of fire, leading terrified citizens to empty stores of rice and instant ramen. North Korea has perfected the art of inciting conflicts through threats and weaponry displays, followed by negotiations meant to win over compromises. Because of this, a lot of South Koreans think that North Korea is utilizing its old script to garner attention in election year for both South Korea and the US. We're out of time for this edition. Please join us again next time for The Pulse. I'm Esmeralda Padilla Gould. Thank you for watching.
And I'm Sarah Obal. Thank you and God bless your week.